Hey guys, I'm back from Iceman, Michigan in November, and while we didn't have the sun and the golden leaves that we did last year, we did have 60-degree weather and it didn't rain on us, but the track was wet. Yeah, I just figured I'd talk to you about my race, do a little race recap because it was fun, fast, and yet again the crowds were just going crazy. Okay, so Iceman is a point-to-point mountain bike race from Kalkaska, Michigan. We started in airport, and this year's race was 28.5 miles to the Timber Ridge RV Park outside of Traverse City. We did those 28.5 miles in an hour and a half. I averaged like 18.8. I think the winners were just at like 19 or something. Last year we did 2 more miles, so 30.5 miles, and we averaged 20 miles an hour. So imagine ripping through the woods for an hour and a half at 20 miles an hour. It's a pretty rad race. This year with the rain, the track was a little softer and slower, so that probably had something to do with the decreased speed, because it surely wasn't for lack of firepower at the front. This year we had Alexei Vermeulen's back, Cole's back, I'm back, and then Riley Amos, a couple Bear Devo guys. The front was stacked, and right off the line that was made very apparent. There was about a mile and a half from the start until that first bit of single track, and once we got into that first bit of single track, things really started stringing out. You could tell this by me letting a bit of a gap open. For one thing, I was just like kind of getting used to the setup. This year, I ran the drop bar bike again. I ran it last year, but last year I used the rad fork with a 2.1 Aspen in the front and a 50C Rambler in the back. This year, running the Libre with a full rigid fork and Maxxis Ravager 50Cs front and rear. So the setup was great. Like I said, I was pushing it, trying to get used to it early on. I didn't do a ton of time on this bike. Those first 40 minutes were just full gas. This is where maybe I would have liked to have the fork on my bike, just because some of those early single track sections were super bumpy. But then once we popped out of that kind of 40-minute mark and we started hitting the smoother roads towards the back half of the course, that's when this thing really shined. Regardless, whoever was at the front, it was either Riley or Bear Devo guys, I don't know. I was like 10 wheels back, just hanging on, but we were pushing really hard, harder than I remember pushing for the first half last year. Regardless, once we popped out into the more open spaces, then it was kind of like regroup, recover. We had a big group of 10, and then I think even more people joined that group as we got further into the lap. Yeah, the name of the game was pushing early, and then it was kind of like, okay, there's a lull in this pace, because basically from about K25 until about 12K to go, we were kind of like resting and getting ready for that final push into the finish line. I made it to about 22K in or so, and unfortunately this is kind of where like the defining moment for my race happened, and then it was in a bad way. I got a stick kind of caught up in my derailleur. Nothing happened, the stick popped out, but with that kind of bump in my derailleur, those of you who are familiar with the Di2 system will know what crash mode is. And so what happens is when your derailleur gets hit, your derailleur can go into crash mode, which just freezes it, and this prevents you from shifting up into the bigger cogs, and potentially the derailleur thinks that if your derailleur got hit, maybe your hanger's bent, it prevents you from shifting into the spokes. In my case, the derailleur went into crash mode, but the hanger wasn't bent at all, and so I unfortunately had to stop, hold down the button on the junction box for 5 seconds, and then what happens is the derailleur goes through all the gears in increments to make sure that you can indeed shift into all the gears. Once it goes through all the gears, then it's just back in normal mode. So I probably lost 30 to 45 seconds when all is said and done, and I was just gutted because I was feeling really good. You know, that first bit of pushing was hard on me, but then I was really comfortable in the group and just kind of really content on positioning, and I was really focused on that last kind of 5K. I kind of had a plan. Unfortunately, I was left to chase. And so there were some other stragglers that had fallen off the front group. I linked up with one of them, a Canadian junior, Zurich Paye. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right.
Right there, one more pull.
But I was
Good
like,
job,
hey man,
dude.
let's catch these guys. I knew there was gonna be a lull in the pace just from racing last year. Sure enough, we got on the gas. We were chasing for maybe 7 minutes or so, and then we could kind of see the group up ahead. So really put the power down, and we managed to bridge back up to the group right around the 15K mark. Or really pumped. I was stoked that we were able to bridge that gap, and then I put myself right at the front. I just didn't want to get caught when somebody attacked. I didn't want to get caught by the yo-yo. I needed to be able to have room to float back through after doing that effort. And sure enough, 3 minutes after we got back onto the group, I put myself in third wheel, and Alexi attacked on one of the longer kind of climbs there, right at around 12K. So Alexi went, Bear Devo guy was second wheel on his wheel, I was third wheel, and I was with those guys as we were making our way up the hill, and I made it over the top. We had like maybe a 5-second gap back to the field, but then over the top, instead of reprieve, it kind of just false flatted for a while, and I couldn't hang on. A bike lengths turned into 2, and then 3, and then before you know it, I was looking back at the group, seeing who was gonna come up here, and maybe we could trade some pulls or something, but it just wasn't in the cards. I spent too many matches chasing back on, and so I fell back into the chase group, which was the fight for 3rd through 9th place. We made it up over one of the climbs about 5K in, and some supporters on the side told us about 20 seconds.
20 seconds, 20 seconds, just 2 of them up there.
It just seemed like we were too big of a group. It was too flat. We weren't working together. So Alexi and the Bear Devo guy were off on their own, and we were fighting for 3rd. The next decisive moment was after Kerry Mountain, I think it's called. We traversed closer into the venue and made it about 3K from the finish, where we popped into a really tight single track section. And this was where I really kind of sealed my fate. I needed to go into that thing in the top 2 wheels of our group or so. I went into it second to last wheel, and by the time we came out, just from that bottleneck on the entrance, and then until we popped out, there was big gaps spread out throughout our group, and I just didn't have the legs to bring it back before Icebreaker Hill. Cole Patton passed me up Icebreaker Hill, and then I kind of limped in from there. Thank you everybody that was standing on Icebreaker Hill and the next climb who was cheering. That was amazing. Y'all pushed me through to the finish, and yeah, a little disappointed about that end result, but at the same time I was happy to at least be able to finish up in the top 10. After that mechanical, I kind of thought maybe that was it for me, but luckily me and Zurich bridged back up, and that salvaged my race. So all in all, another great year at Iceman. Super fun. The weather, while it was wet, was still warm. It was not snowing, so that was a treat. Really liked the setup. I think I'm still pretty sold on the drop bars for Iceman. That last little bit of single track at the end, there's like 3 sections all within 3K to go, and it was so tight in there that I can't imagine it was super fast for anybody with 720 plus millimeter bars. So these tires are basically mountain bike tires from the 90s, and they hooked up well. I was pushing all day, and they were taking everything that I was pushing into them, and they were locking up. So probably race the same setup next year, maybe bring the fork. That way I can test it out on track. But yeah, another good year at Iceman, and thanks for watching. That was my race recap. If you guys have any questions, leave them in the comments below. What's next for me? We've got 2 more races in the season for me. One is the Hendersonville UCI cross race, so I'm back to cyclocross. So stoked about that. Second weekend in December, cyclocross nationals. I went ahead and signed up for single speed. That's right, I'm vying for 2 medals at nationals this year. And this is not a call for retirement. This is not anything like that. Personally, I hate sitting around all week and waiting for that one race on Sunday. So I signed up for single speed. 1, to have a little bit of fun. 2, I want that jersey. And 3, I think it'll be a good opener for me. I think it'll be good mentally for me to get that race in before nationals. I had good luck at Hartford the last time we were there. I was on the podium. See if we can do that or better this year.